a stave of yew wood, 6 feet long, shaped by a village craftsman, strung with hemp. A farmer could carry one over his shoulder. On the morning of the 25th of October, 1415, at least 5,000 of them were in English hands on a plowed field in northern France. Facing them stood the wealth of a kingdom: dukes, counts, the Constable of France, men whose armor cost more than an English village produced in a year. By that afternoon, thousands of those Frenchmen were dead in the mud, and a great many of them were never touched by a blade. They suffocated, face down, crushed under the weight of their own army falling on top of them. The most expensive war machine in Europe had just been stopped by a stick, and the stick was not even an English idea. To understand how it got into English hands, and why England could not keep it in the end, we go back 2 centuries to a country the English were busy conquering. For 500 years, European warfare had one answer to almost every question: the armored man on a horse. A knight was not a soldier. He was a weapons system, and he was ruinously expensive. A full harness of plate was years of a master armorer's labor. The warhorse under him, bred and trained for the charge, could cost as much as a small farm. Add the squires, the grooms, the spare mounts, the armorer on campaign, and one night in the field cost the wealth of an entire estate. That expense bought something real. A charge of heavy cavalry, delivered properly, broke almost anything. Infantry that stood in the open were ridden down. Infantry that ran were hunted for miles. For most of the medieval period, if you were a man on foot and an armored horse came at you across open ground, you had 2 choices: find a wall or die. And this was not only a military fact. The nobility ruled because the nobility fought. The nobility fought because only the nobility could afford to. The land, the taxes, the oaths, the whole idea that some men are born to command and others born to dig. All of it rested on one piece of battlefield arithmetic. A mounted, armored man was worth 50 men on foot. Break that arithmetic, and everything stacked on top of it starts to move. The English did not invent the English longbow. Tall bows of heavy draw are ancient in northern Europe. At Nydam Mose in Denmark, archaeologists pulled 36 bows out of a bog, the longest of them over 6 feet, deposited sometime between the 3rd and 5th centuries after Christ. There is nothing in the design that required a stroke of English genius. It is a stick. What happened is that the English met it the hard way. Somebody shot at them with it. Through the 12th and 13th centuries, English armies pushed into Wales, and in the valleys they ran into archers doing things nobody had planned for. Gerald of Wales left the account everyone still quotes. He described a Welsh arrow that went through a knight's armored thigh, through the leather skirt of his tunic, through the saddle, and into the horse underneath, and killed it. Treat that one carefully. Gerald was a Cambro-Norman cleric, writing in Latin for the Angevin court, with a professional appetite for marvels, and no modern test has reproduced anything like it. He also says those Welsh bows were made of elm rather than yew, and calls them ugly, unfinished-looking things. But the caution is about the detail, not the pattern. Something was happening in Wales that English commanders had not seen before. And the English response was not to invent a counter-weapon. The English response was to hire the men who were shooting at them. So they bought them. Welsh archers start appearing in English armies in real numbers under Edward I, the king who spent his reign hammering Wales flat. By the time his grandson went to war in France, the bow had stopped being a Welsh curiosity and become an English institution. But copying a stick is easy. A longbow is not a weapon. It is a weapon plus a man. And the man took 20 years to build. Start with the wood, because the wood is where the trouble begins. A yew stave has 2 layers that behave in opposite ways. The pale sapwood on the outside of the tree stretches. The dark heartwood underneath resists being crushed. Keep both in the same stave, and drawing the bow sets the 2 woods fighting each other. 1 layer pulled, 1 layer compressed. All of that struggle is stored energy, and it comes back out down the length of an arrow. That is a natural composite material, arrived at with no theory of material science whatsoever, by men who could not read a word. And it is fussy. The stave has to be straight and free of knots because a knot is a weak point, and a weak point in a 150-pound bow does not fail gently. It has to come from a tree that grew slowly, in cold and poor ground. English yew mostly does not grow like that. It grows fast and it grows twisted, in mild, wet soil, and the staves worth having were never there in the numbers England needed. So England went shopping. The staves that mattered came from the cold, high forests of the continent, and England became dependent enough on those imports to write them into law. The Statute of Westminster in 1472 required every merchant ship arriving in an English port to carry 4 bow staves for every ton of cargo aboard. Richard III later raised it to 10. Read that again. A country taxed international trade in wood in order to keep its farmers armed. And when even that was not enough, kings sent men out to strip their own island. Before the Agincourt campaign, Henry V sent his royal bowyer, a man named Nicholas Frost, out with authority to requisition yew wherever he could find it. Remember his name. He is one of the very few men in this story we can name at all. Then there is the draw weight, and this is the number that stops people. For centuries it was guesswork, because wooden bows rot and none survived in usable condition. Then in 1982, a wreck came up out of the Solent. The Mary Rose, Henry VIII's warship, had gone down in 1545 with almost everything aboard, and the mud had kept it. Divers recovered 172 longbows and thousands of arrows. The originals came up waterlogged and unshootable. So bowyers built replicas from the recorded dimensions in sound yew and drew those instead. The estimates that came back are still argued over. The Mary Rose Trust puts the range at 65 to 175 pounds, clustering around 110. Robert Hardy, who ran the testing, argued the commonest warbows were nearer 150, with the heaviest close to 185. Take the low end, and it is double a modern bow. Take the high end, and it is not a sport. Because a competitive modern archer shoots between 40 and 60. You do not pull a bow like that with your arm. It cannot be done. An archer laid his whole body into it, pushed with the left arm while rotating the back, and opened his chest against the wood until the string reached his ear, then held it, then aimed, then let it go clean, then did it again. But not for long, and this is where the films get it wrong. He carried around 60 to 70 arrows in bundles of 24. Not thousands, 60. An arrow storm was not weather that lasted all afternoon. It was a few violent minutes, and then men were pulling arrows out of the ground in front of them, and then there was nothing left to shoot. A heavy crossbow, in that same minute, shot twice. So that was the whole equation. Not power. A crossbow matched the power, and a crossbowman could be trained in a week. Volume, delivered in a very short window, by thousands of men at once. That is the only thing the longbow could do that nothing else could, and it cost 20 years per man, because nobody is born able to do this. The kings knew that, and they legislated. In 1363, Edward III ordered every able-bodied man to practice archery on Sundays and holy days, and banned the competition outright. No handball, no cockfighting, no football, not because he disapproved of fun, but because he needed the arms. Boys started around 7 on small bows and moved up as they grew. The bow grew into them. We know that because we have the bodies. The skeletons from the Mary Rose are marked by the work, thickened left forearms. And in nearly 1 in 5 of the crew, a shoulder blade where the tip of the bone never fused. It is a condition called os acromiale. It turns up in modern elite archers, and the Mary Rose team reads it as the mark of heavy drawing begun in childhood, before the bone had finished closing. Clinical studies since have pushed back and argued for a genetic cause instead. The argument is live. What is not in dispute is that nearly 1/5 of that crew had it. One of those men came up almost complete from the hold. Both his shoulders show it. A forensic artist rebuilt his face from a scan of his skull, muscle by muscle. And you can stand in front of him today in Portsmouth and look him in the eye. We have his face. We have his spine, his arms, and the exact damage his job did to him. We do not have his name. We know the name of the man who went out to cut the wood. We do not know the name of a single man the wood broke. England did not manufacture a weapon. It took a generation of its own farmers, deformed them into one on purpose, by law, and then did not bother to write down who they were. The rest of Europe found out what that meant on a hillside in Picardy. The 26th of August, 1346. Edward III had been burning his way through northern France, and Philip VI finally caught him near a village called CRÉCY. Edward put his men on a slope, dismounted his own knights, which was close to heresy at the time, and set the archers on the flanks. Philip sent his crossbowmen forward first. Genoese mercenaries, somewhere between 2,000 and 6,000 of them, depending on which source you trust, and among the finest missile troops in Europe. 3 things had already gone wrong: their pavises, the tall shields they sheltered behind while reloading. The entire reason a crossbowman survives an exchange at all were still back with the baggage. Nobody had brought them up. A rainstorm had come through, and a crossbow string is awkward to remove. The English, so the chroniclers say, had simply unstrung their bows and put the strings under their hats. And the Genoese had marched all day to get there, while the English had been standing still, resting, eating. They advanced, shot, and fell short. The English drew. The chroniclers reach for the same image again and again when they describe what came down. Snow. It looked like snow falling. The Genoese broke. Any troops on earth would have broken. And then something happened that had nothing to do with the English at all. The Genoese were pulling back through the French line to reform, which is what any unit does. Behind them sat the French nobility, watching low-born foreign mercenaries move backwards in front of them. According to Froissart, Philip VI gave the order himself. "Kill me those scoundrels, for they block our road for nothing." French heavy cavalry rode forward through their own hired crossbowmen, cutting them down as they went, and carried on up the slope into the arrows. Some historians think there was never a deliberate order, and that this was a collision in the chaos of a badly managed advance. Either way, the men died the same. Their commanders were Ottone Doria and Carlo Grimaldi, Lord of Monaco. Grimaldi lived. He was carried off that field wounded and left for dead in a rout his own employers had started. He died a decade later at home. Sit with that, because it is the whole story compressed into 1 minute of one afternoon. The French had the correct answer to the longbow standing on that field. Professional missile troops, properly equipped in numbers, and they destroyed them personally with their own horses, because those men were the wrong class and had committed the unforgivable sin of retreating in front of noblemen. The longbow did not beat French chivalry at Crécy. French chivalry could not conceive of a battle in which men with sticks were the deciding factor. And that failure of imagination killed it, over and over for the next 70 years. If this is landing for you, subscribe. One weapon a week on this channel. What it was, who paid for it, and what it broke. Because 69 years later, the French tried to fix exactly that problem. And the way they tried is the reason Agincourt looks the way it does. At Agincourt, the arrows did not need to kill anybody. Henry V's army was in poor shape. He had taken Harfleur and lost thousands of men to dysentery doing it. And he was trying to walk to Calais before the French cut him off. They cut him off. On the night of the 24th of October, 1415, his force made camp opposite an army with every reason to be confident. The odds were long. The older accounts say 3 or 4 to 1. Anne Curry, working from the surviving pay records, argues it was closer to 4 to 3. Everyone agrees the English were outnumbered, sick, and hungry. Between the two armies lay a recently plowed field, narrowing between 2 woods. It had been raining for days. The French plan was sound. Advance on foot, in plate, and close with the English line where archery would not matter. By 1415, a good breastplate at distance was hard for an arrow to defeat, and the tests still disagree about what a bodkin point could do against quality steel. But the arrows did not have to punch through anything. They only had to make men put their heads down. Picture a man in 50 pounds of plate, plus his weapons, walking 300 yards across a plowed field turned to deep mud. He is already near his physical limit before anyone shoots at him. Now put arrows on him from a steep angle. He tucks his chin. He drops his visor and narrows his sight to a slot the width of a finger. His breathing goes shallow inside the helmet. And he drifts inward, away from the flanks where the shooting is worst, toward the men beside him doing exactly the same thing. The French line compressed as it advanced. Nobody ordered that. Thousands of frightened men individually flinched away from the edges. By the time they reached the English, they were packed too tightly to raise their arms and swing. Then the ranks behind pushed into the ranks in front. Men went down in the mud and could not get up. A man in full harness, on his back, in churned earth, needs a hand to rise. The hand was being trampled. Others fell on top of him, and others on top of them, and the chroniclers describe the dead at Agincourt piled into heaps taller than a standing man. They drowned in mud, or their chests gave out under the weight of their own army. And an unknown share of those men were never wounded at all. The dead were counted in the thousands. The traditional figures run from 6 to 10,000. The revisionist reading, working only from what can be documented, pushes it lower. Either way, the dead included the Constable of France, 3 dukes, 5 counts, and close to 100 other men holding titles. The English lost a few hundred. Then it got worse. With thousands of French prisoners standing behind his lines, and a counterattack apparently forming, Henry ordered the prisoners killed. His men-at-arms refused. That was partly conscience and partly arithmetic. A captured noble was a ransom, and a ransom was a fortune. So the job went to an esquire and 200 archers. Some of them refused as well. Enough of them did not. The men who had spent their entire lives being shaped into a weapon were then handed the act the knightly class would not perform itself. That is what an English archer was, and that is how a stick humbled kings. Not by punching through armor. That part was always overstated. By making the expensive man cheap. A duke was decades of accumulated wealth and a lifetime of training. He could now be stopped at 250 yards by a farmer's son he would never meet. Across most of the war, that son cost the crown 3 pence a day on foot, 6 pence if he brought a horse. By Agincourt, Henry was paying every archer in his own retinue 6 pence. Every power in Europe watched this happen 3 times. Crécy, then Poitiers in 1356, then Agincourt, and every power in Europe tried to copy it. Here is the part that usually gets told wrong. They did not fail to try. In 1448, Charles VII of France created the Franks archers, one archer chosen out of every parish, exempt from the taille, the land tax, required to practice on Sundays and holy days, ready to march at a word. France wrote the same habits into law. It bought them something for a while. Then it fell apart. The Franks archers grew badly disciplined. They broke at Guinegate in 1479, and Louis XI scrapped the whole institution soon after, which tells you what the real ingredient was, and it was never the statute. England had spent a century and a half building a society in which an armed, trained, indispensable peasantry was normal. The men came with the bowyears. The bowyears came with the ewe supply. The ewe supply came with the parish habit and the family memory, and the boy handed a small bow at 7 years old. You cannot legislate that in a generation. France passed the law and could not grow the men. So the French did what people do when they cannot copy a system. They changed the game, because the longbow was never defeated. It was outlived, and by two things at once. The first was ecological. Europe's slow-grown yew could not survive the demand. The supply forests of the continent were stripped through the 15th and 16th centuries, feeding the bow, decade after decade, until good staves got scarce and then expensive, and then simply not there. The weapon ate its own raw material. The second was the gun, and the gun won for the reason the longbow had been unbeatable. A longbowman took 20 years to make. A man with a matchlock took a fortnight. The arquebus was less accurate, slower, and in most respects a worse weapon in the 1500s. It did not matter. You could raise an army of them in a season, out of men who had never held a weapon in their lives, and replace them as fast as they died. In 1595, the Privy Council ordered the English-trained bands to give up the bow for firearms, and the argument was over. The thing that made the longbow unbeatable, that it took a lifetime, is the thing that killed it. And the scale of it at its height is difficult to hold in your head. Arrows need feathers, and feathers came from geese. In 1418, Henry V ordered his sheriffs to gather 1,190,000 goose feathers and deliver them to the Tower of London within 10 months. An earlier order gives the rate, 6 feathers taken from each bird. Run that arithmetic on a single campaign, an entire country's geese, a continent's yew forests, and a generation's shoulders. It was an old northern design England did not invent. It had to be shot with before it paid attention. It hired the Welshmen who used it. It made practice compulsory and banned football to protect it. It taxed every cargo ship in the country to import the wood. At CRÉCY, French noblemen rode down their own crossbowmen rather than let commoners decide a battle. At Agincourt, the men it built were handed the killing their betters refused to do. It stripped the yew forests of a continent. It left its marks on the shoulder blades of men whose names nobody wrote down. And in the end, a fool with a matchlock did what it took a lifetime to do. Cheap and replaceable beats expensive and irreplaceable. And the people who own the expensive one are usually the last to see it coming. Europe learned that in 1346 and had forgotten it by 1415. It had to learn it again on the Somme in 1916. It is not obvious that anyone has learned it since. If this surprised you, subscribe and answer me one thing in the comments. Twice in this story, somebody destroyed the exact thing that would have saved them. Once with horses, in a single afternoon. Once with an axe and a market, over 150 years. Tell me which one you think was the greater act of stupidity and why. Next week, the machine gun. The first one that mattered was built by a qualified physician who believed it would reduce the number of dead in war. He said so in writing. 54 years later, the guns that came after his were killing more men before lunch than the longbow killed in a century.